There's a street in Shildon, County Durham, where the Locomotion Museum sits at one end, a building that commemorates the moment this town invented the modern world, and at the other end you can buy a two-bedroom terrace for less than £28,000. Not rent, buy. Less than the price of a nearly new Volkswagen Golf. The museum's gift shop probably turns over more in a month than some of those properties are worth in total. That's not a quirk, that's a pattern. And it's running right through the UK right now, through old mill towns and post-industrial ports and seaside places that got left behind, through places the media forgot to check back in on, through places where entire streets changed hands and nobody in the south noticed. This is not a property investment video. This is about what it means that whole towns have slipped so far outside the national story that you can now buy a home in them for the price of a used car. Shildon built the railway that connected Britain. Now it's being reconnected by people who don't need to commute at all. The Manchester graphic designers buying outright at 29, working from a converted back bedroom, mortgage-free before 30, while their university friends are still splitting a two-bed rental in Hume. The town itself is uneven. Some streets have persistent vacancy. The bus service is quietly embarrassing for a place that invented public transport. But the price is real, and increasingly, people are doing the maths. That tension, extraordinary history, extraordinary affordability, complicated present, runs even stranger when you take it somewhere surrounded by scenery worth millions. Blaenau Gwent sits inside Snowdonia National Park. The slate landscape around it just became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can buy a house there for £35,000. Think about that. A World Heritage Site, £35,000. The slate tips that overshaded this town for 150 years, that defined it, that made its air grey and its streets narrow. Those tips are now the UNESCO asset that could eventually price the locals out. The industrial scar became the attraction. The attraction becomes the pressure. The London climber who moved here for the mountains and now runs an outdoor guiding business didn't plan to be at the front of that wave. But here she is. The wave has already reached Burnley. Over 70 properties are currently listed under £50,000 in a town with a direct rail link to Manchester Piccadilly. 25 minutes on the train. The commute maths just starts to work. The Manchester nurse who bought a 3-bed terrace for £62,000 is the only person in her department who owns a home. She is not even sure her colleagues believe her when she tells them the price. Parts of Burnley have deep structural problems. Cheap doesn't mean uniform, and it doesn't mean easy. But Burnley FC plays in a stadium that would look at home in a city twice the size. The town punches up everywhere except the housing market. That gap is closing slowly, and the people who arrived 5 years ago knew it before the people arriving now. £285,000, £130,000, £155,000. Those are the average house prices in England, Grimsby and Stoke-on-Trent right now. Hold those numbers. Grimsby has been carrying a reputation for decline that is at least a decade out of date. The offshore wind sector along the Humber is not a promise. It's active infrastructure, real jobs, real relocation packages. The offshore wind engineer who moved from Aberdeen bought a 4-bed detached for £145,000 and has stopped trying to convince his friends back home to follow him, because it makes him sound like he's running a cult. The town's image problem might actually be its last remaining moat. Once the narrative shifts, prices follow. They always do. That shift hasn't fully arrived in Hartlepool yet either, which means the window is still open. The Bristol teacher who left a rented room to buy a seafront flat for £68,000 The same price as a parking space in her old postcode describes the view from her living room in a way that sounds like she's slightly embarrassed to be this happy about a decision that felt like settling at the time. The Teesside Freeport is the biggest economic bet in the northeast. Hartlepool is adjacent to it. That either matters enormously in 10 years or it doesn't. Right now, you can afford to find out. We keep saying these places are being discovered. But discovered by whom exactly? And what happens to the people who never left? That question lands heaviest in Stoke-on-Trent. Here is the most centrally located city in England. 45 minutes from Birmingham, 60 from Manchester. A real city, not a town, with a university, a cultural sector, fast rail in 2 directions. And parts of it are available for under £80,000. Why? The answer is uncomfortable. Stoke's health and life expectancy data is among the worst in England. The city has structural challenges that affordability alone cannot fix, and the creative sector arriving in converted bottle kilns and old ceramics factories knows it. The ceramics graduate, who studied here, couldn't afford anywhere else, stayed, and is now running a studio in a kiln she'd never have found space for in any other city. She's not naive about what surrounds her. Stoke made the objects that filled Britain's homes for 200 years and cannot retain the young people it produces. That is not a housing market problem. That is a much older wound. The wound in Merthyr Tydfil is the same wound, older and deeper. Cyfarthfa Castle looms over the town. It was built by the ironmaster whose furnaces powered the British Empire. It's now a museum and a school. Below it, you can buy a terrace for £40,000. The castle looks down on properties worth less than a single room inside it would cost to renovate. Merthyr generated enormous wealth for the men at the top and almost none for the town itself. And that dynamic, a place producing value it never got to keep, did not end with the iron industry. The person who grew up here, got a degree, moved to Cardiff, earns a reasonable salary and still cannot afford to buy back in Cardiff. So comes home, feels the complicated weight of that. This is not nostalgia, this is arithmetic. There is a mural on Glebeland Street that a local artist painted during lockdown. It's still there. It shows the valley in summer and the faces of people who stayed. It is genuinely worth seeing. Some places carry beauty and tragedy in the same breath. Merthyr does that in every direction you look. Hull knew it was allowed to be proud of itself before the rest of England gave it permission. The City of Culture year in 2017 gave the city a story about itself it didn't know it had the right to tell, and some residents still look slightly startled when it's told back to them. The old fruit market is now full of independent bars and studio spaces. The creative director who moved from London found a 5-bed Victorian terrace for £180,000 and has stopped explaining her decision because the explanation sounds too obvious. Hull's isolation is real. There's nowhere beyond it. It's a destination, not a through route, but for people who have decided to stay, being somewhere with a strong sense of its own identity turns out to feel less like a limitation and more like a foundation. The distance between unaffordable and possible is sometimes 14 miles. That is the gap between Nottingham and Mansfield. Nottingham's housing market is tightening fast, and Mansfield is the next step outward. Terraces from £70,000, a manageable commute, the slow accumulation of signals, a coffee shop that doesn't look like it belongs here yet, an independent food business, Nottingham renters at open days asking questions they clearly didn't expect to be asking. The hospital porter who moved here because it was the only way to stop renting has a garden his children use every day. That is a small thing that is not a small thing. None of these towns made this list because they're perfect. They made this list because the alternative is renting a studio flat in a city that barely registers your existence. Which brings us to Middlesbrough, the transporter bridge, the chemical plants that light up the Teesside skyline at night like something from another century, a Victorian terrace under £100,000. MIMA, the Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art, is one of the best free galleries in the north of England, and almost nobody outside Teesside knows it. The young engineer who turned down a London graduate scheme because the salary gap no longer justified the housing cost gap is starting to think she made the right call. The Teesworks development is not without controversy, land deals, planning questions. The gap between announced investment and felt improvement is real and people notice it. But the ambition is not performance. This is the largest industrial regeneration project in the United Kingdom. It either proves that levelling up can work, or it proves the phrase was always a press release. We will know which soon. Every place in this list is cheap for a reason, some for geography, some for history, some because of decisions made in Westminster 40 years ago that nobody has reversed. But the through line is this. Britain built a housing system where value is almost entirely determined by proximity to London, and everything else has been priced accordingly, meaning these places were priced out of relevance before they were priced into opportunity. The map is shifting. Some of these towns are at the start of a wave. Some are permanently waiting for one. And somewhere between those two possibilities, real people are making irreversible decisions. The cheapest house in England isn't a bargain. It's a verdict. And we should probably ask who wrote it.